Hello and welcome to the Sun Country Pilots podcast. I'm your host, Captain Tyler Lauer, and today we're sitting down with First Officer Terry Pretzloff to discuss our hotel committee and what work they are doing for you and how you can help them in that work. So welcome, Terry. Thanks for sitting down with me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So to get started, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself, maybe your history with that within Sun Country, within ALPA, kind of what your career has been so far.
Yeah, I started out at SkyWest, like a lot of people here, and kind of at the time the word was go to Sun Country. They got a new contract, they're hiring. I always thought I would end up going into some flow program over there. You never know what your career is going to end up being like. Everything's so dynamic. Anyway, ended up coming over here in 2022. Um, yeah, it's been great. I really enjoyed the time here. And the pilot group is awesome. I like the culture. A little bit of history and how I got to the hotel committee. I've always considered myself somewhat of a hotel snob. You spend all these times, and all our pilots do. They spend time away from their families. They sacrifice going on 4 or 5, some even 6-day trips. What really becomes important is the quality of life that they have when they're on the road, entertainment, food options, and obviously, most importantly, good rest. Back under the previous MEC, Eric Mink was asking for volunteers. He listened to the Tuesday at 2 calls. Just was an interest that I had, and I didn't want to bite off more than I can chew, so I called up Eric and, hey, what's the time commitment for this? And now you can really make it what you want to be and work as hard as you want or as little as you want if you just want to help out on a few little things. Unbeknownst to me at the time, I kind of hit the ground running and jumped into the deep end of the pool, and here we are.
Very good. Well, I, for one, certainly appreciate the work you guys do. I know it's probably a lot of work, tons of different hotels, and that's kind of our point today is talking about how you guys go out and find those hotels and that process. So, starting at square one, what's kind of the starting point? How do you guys know where to look? Do you guys have like a baseline for the type of hotel you look for, locations, that kind of stuff? What's your starting point?
The company uses a third party vendor called TA Connections, and our travel department will engage TA Connections and say, hey, look, we need to source hotels in, let's use LA, for example. We just did LA recently. We need to source hotels in LA. So they reach out to the vendor. The vendor works with, and I didn't know this at the time when I started. I've learned this through doing this role, but all these hotels, most of these hotels are owned not by the brand itself. So we use Hilton. They're not owned by Hilton. A lot of them are owned by third-party management companies. And some of those management companies might own a handful of Hiltons in one city, a handful of Marriotts in another city, a handful of another brand in another city, right? So they're reaching out to all these management companies, hotels themselves, maybe even sometimes the national brands, because the national brands do own some properties. So they're getting us what's called an RFP, a request for proposal. And that's just an Excel spreadsheet document with all the details on the different hotels. So the company will get that back from TA Connections, and then they'll look at it. Obviously, the company has somewhat of a say in hotels to an extent, and they'll narrow that down. They're obligated by the contract to give us at least 3 options when they provide us with an RFP. So then she'll send that over to us. We'll take a look at it. Some cities don't necessarily require a site visit. We try to do site visits as often as we can. There's some cities that you've stayed at, or you've seen a hotel, or you've stayed at that property in the past, and now it's an option again. Like Gulfport, for example, we didn't go site visit when we moved from the Hilton over to the Bow because we knew the pilot group loved the Bow, so we just elected to move back. But so we narrow that down and try to figure out, do our research beforehand, look at the maps, see what kind of things are around, look at the hotel, see what kind of amenities it has. The RFP is pretty good. It really breaks down if the hotel is going to give us state credits, and a lot of pilots, that's important. State credits, the brand points. So we always look at that. A lot of guys are into fitness, making sure there's a good
Hmm.
gym. Although that's not a contractually required to have a gym, but we know that's important to a lot of people, along with fridges and microwaves, that those aren't contractually required, but we try to secure those whenever possible. And then food and beverage discounts, all that stuff is listed in the RFP. So we really comb through that pretty good. And then once we've decided which hotels are going to be the top ones we think based on the research that we've done, then we'll engage with travel and set up a time to get out there and site visit, check out the area, check out the hotels, meet with the management, and all that kind of stuff. And then once that's done, talk amongst the committee, and then make a decision on which hotel we want to be at. And then we'll send that back to travel. she'll engage with TA and the hotel property and see if there's if there's like use Las Vegas for example. Las Vegas, when we site visited that, the Luxor, they wanted to charge pilots for, it was like $10 for a refrigerator. And we're like, that's silly, right? We're giving you all this business. Why are you going to charge us for a refrigerator? So we selected the Luxor. We went back to travel and said, hey, look, can you negotiate with the hotel, get us the fridges for free? No problem. Done deal. So we'll do things like that after we make a selection, try to negotiate, maybe get the pilots a little bit more amenities if we can.
Sure. Yeah, that's kind of big. I know a lot of people are, like you said, they're picky about the hotels, and so it's good to see that there's quite the process in place to even just pick a handful of them and start narrowing it down. So when you guys do a site visit, what does that kind of look like? And you kind of talked about, you go to the hotel. Are you guys staying at the hotel? Do you guys get to go into, several rooms to make sure that the hotel as a whole meets CBA requirements? Are you guys eating at some of the restaurants that are close by? Like, what does that site visit actually look like?
Yeah, let me back up just one second. You talked about trying to select the best hotel, and I just want to give a hats off to the hotel committee, the guys that are on here. I've got obviously myself, Steve Trago recently came back, Alex Dauphin, Ben Litchfield, Matt Bowden, and the challenge is always to try to please 700 and some
Yeah,
pilots, right? That's almost impossible. And these guys are very stand up guys. There's never been once where we've looked at a hotel where we've had a disagreement. And we really try to look at what would the pilot group want and would I feel safe and would I feel comfortable with putting my family in this hotel. And if you look at it from that aspect of it, you can usually choose a good hotel that's going to suit the majority of the pilot group. We're never going to please everybody. We understand that some guys hate downtown hotels, for an example, and some guys hate I call them mall parking lot hotels, right? Where you get the one where there's a mall across the street and a couple restaurants. But what I can say is we've got a good variety of hotels between the downtowns and the mall parking lot hotels, if you will. And we try to keep that in mind, right? We're not catering to one part of the pilot group. And if you look at the guys that I mentioned on the hotel committee, we really got a diverse group of pilots here that represent, I think, the pilot group as a whole. You got Steve Trago that's been here for quite a long time. Alex has been here for 10 years. I think Ben's been here a little bit longer than I have. I've coming up on 4 years, and I think Matt is just shy of where I'm at. 2.5, 3 years, I believe he's been here. So I think we've got a really good representation that can really make good selections on behalf of the pilot group.
yeah. It certainly is good to have several people. I think in this committee, instead of having one or two guys, like you said, you got to try to please 700 pilots, and the more people you have in the committee, the more ideas, the more preferences. You can kind of hear out those ideas. That's good to see, and good to have line pilots out there too. I mean, you guys are out there living it just like we are, so I think that's really important.
Yeah, and with that, two things that were important to me when we were getting this committee reestablished is an odd. Just there's 5 people on the committee, so there's an odd number, and that was intentional from the standpoint that if we have, let's say we're looking at a hotel and we say, okay, guys, what hotel should we choose in this location? There's always going to be a tiebreaker if nobody disagrees, right? So there's going to be an odd number. There's always going to be 3 votes to two
Sure.
votes, right? So I felt that would, if we had 4 and 4, then we get to a split decision. What do
Right.
we do? So it was important to have the 5 there. And the other notable thing there is Alex and I are the only 2 that live in base. The other guys are commuters. So they're bidding for 5-day trips consistently, where I'll mix in on, depending on what I got going on in life, I might mix in a 2-day and maybe a couple of turns. I live 45 minutes from the airport, so I typically don't like to do
Yep.
turns, but some months I end up with it just how the bid pack shakes out,
Sure.
right? But yeah, I became a pilot to live in a hotel, right? That's cool. If I get the 4-day trips, then you get to experience it and see what different hotels are all about and check out other cities and whatnot.
Very good. So we talked about, hotel points before. So why do some hotels take points and why do some not take points?
Yeah, the easiest one I can use is our old training hotel in Minneapolis and Egan there. That hotel was independently owned and operated by a management company. So when TA Connections and Sun Country Travel Department negotiate the contracts, sometimes they're able to negotiate the brand points. Other times, depending on the management company, that might not be something they're willing to negotiate.
Sure.
And because they're all independently owned and operated, they have that say to award those or to not award them.
Gotcha. Very good. Yeah, I've often wondered that, and at the front desk, they're not going to tell you that kind of information. They're not going to be like, well, we got a management company that runs us. They're just going to be, yeah, we don't take points. Sorry, guys. So you kind of just move on with your day. So,
Totally,
yeah,
totally. We're all trying to build up our Hilton and Marriott
yeah,
points, so when we go take personal
yeah.
vacations,
I just got
we don't
gold.
stay in
I
a
want
hotel
to,
for
I want to
free.
maintain that.
Oh, yeah, yep, yeah, and then you get, like, a diamond status, and you just don't ever wanna give
Yep.
that
I
up.
want my free water bottles and my candy bar when I check
So
in.
I totally get it. Those are super important to me, so that's always one of the things that I look at, I'm like, "Oh, is this a good hotel? They're gonna give us the
Yep.
points?"
Very good. So after we get a hotel, we're in it for a while. Do you guys go back to make sure that these hotels are still meeting, contractual standards laid out by the CBA? Does that happen often, or how often are you guys revisiting the hotels that we stay at?
Yeah, typically, we have not been. We've had some discussion on that if we should be doing site inspections, if you will. Unfortunately, we've just been so busy with some of the other things on the plate, and there's been a lot of changes. I think we had 10 or 12 different hotel changes that we worked on just last year. And then we've got a handful more that are coming up. LA, we just did because we had some reports of the climate control system not that I guess that'd be a good one to use. Reports of the not having full control over the climate system. So in that particular case, it was pilot reports that dictated a move. We got several darts on that, looked into it further, didn't necessarily going back out to the hotel and doing a site inspection. In that case, we just elected to work with the company and try to find a different hotel in LA, which we've made a selection. We're just waiting on the final results. But a lot of this stuff is really, to be honest, driven by the reports that we get. It's got a sight out of mind. If somebody's not reporting it, we're assuming that it's good. And then, of course, all the 5 of us are always out on overnights and hopping around, so that's always a good gauge to see if the hotel is meeting the standards, and sometimes they're not. LA, a perfect example, and that was brought to our attention. I stayed out there shortly after some of the reports that we got, and unfortunately, it was just been a little bit of a long process to get out of there, but that's a whole nother story. But yeah, we try to rely on the pilot reports, right? Those are like our eyes and ears out there. The more people that report something, and the more that we're going to get that data and be able to address it, and also not only address it but articulate why it's necessary based on the sheer number of complaints, if you will, that we might have gotten through the dart
Yeah,
system.
and there's kind of your our shameless plug for the DART system, but at Alpa we really push that. We don't know what's going on out on the line until someone says something, and so those darts are very important. And I, for one, especially coming from Sam and P2P, we push that. Send darts, whether it's good, whether it's bad. That information is really important for us to collect because that's how we action stuff. Like you said, otherwise it's out of sight, out of mind. We have no idea what the majority of people are dealing with unless we hear about it. So, yeah,
Yeah, what's funny on that is we've sent some comms out in some of these emails, and anytime we mention, "Hey, please submit darts because it helps us drive change," we'll get this influx of darts for a week, right? And it just tapers
yeah,
off. And I'm like, "Where'd those darts?" We were getting all these complete. So yeah, consistency is key, right? If we know about it, we can do something to address it. And I was just on a couple day trip the other day and flying with a reserve captain, and we go to check in at the hotel, and they didn't have the sign-in sheet, and they wanted a credit card, right? Which you need to have the sign-in sheet, most hotels, but you can't ask us for a
right.
credit card, right? And I'm just standing there shaking my head, and I'm like, "Oh my God, this is ridiculous. Why is this so complicated? We shouldn't have to give a credit card." So I'm about to make a phone call to travel to get this sorted out. The captain looks at me, he goes, "Dude, this is my life, like daily." Uh, And I look at I'm like, "Dude, I've never gotten a single dart from you." I'm like, "File darts. If you give us the darts, we have the data, we can do something about it." So I just can't stress enough. The darts are really helpful. And I've designed this Excel spreadsheet that I track all of them. It puts it in a graph. And so when we go have monthly meetings with the company, or if we see a trend in those graphs, we can address it a little bit more promptly.
Can you kind of explain maybe how you guys address some of this? We talked about maybe not so much doing site visits, but DART comes in. Is that information something that's handled at the committee level with just you guys, or how much company involvement you guys have when that information comes in?
Yeah, so it really depends on the problem. A convoluted question without a simple
Sure,
answer. I can give you a couple examples here. We had a crew a couple weeks ago submit a dart for Liberia. Somehow they got put Liberia, Costa Rica. Somehow they got put in the airport hotel, that Hilton that's right across the street with nothing around.
sure.
And this was like the night before. And what we've been seeing is sometimes they're getting last minute bookings, or I'm sorry, not last minute bookings, but last minute, the hotel's not on their schedule. And then the night before, they're doing this international trip to Liberia in this example. And now they get this hotel that pops up on their schedule. They look at it like, whoa, this isn't contractually compliant. So they submitted a DART. And that one was a little bit more complex. I don't know what happened there or how they got placed in the Hilton, but we were able to get it fixed and get them placed in the appropriate property, which is the El Mangrove in Costa Rica. But that took engaging Jackie, who's the senior manager of crew travel, on a Friday evening, I think it was Friday or Saturday evening, to get that resolved. So sometimes we might need to go straight to the top, just depending on the issue. That was a little bit more urgent. We can't have pilots staying at a airport hotel in a third world country with nothing to do. And there's just a whole slew of problems that could go along with that. But other simpler issues like, hey, the hotel didn't have hot water, or the transportation was late, things like that. Those are things that are more important for the pilots to either work out with the hot water example. We just had one of those come in, that's why I use that. But work with the hotel front desk and say, hey, look, is there any other room that you can place me in that's got hot water? If there's not, then engage with travel and get a new hotel. There's a clause in the contract that basically states that if there's a problem at a hotel and moving rooms won't resolve the problem, then travel shall relocate the pilot to a different hotel. So some of the stuff is on the pilot to manage and problem solve in working in conjunction with the travel desk. They're always there willing to help, but then report it afterwards, right? So if we have a hotel that's consistently having hot water problems, then maybe that's something that we need to take a look at and do a deeper dive into what the problem is. And then in that case, if we've got several reports, then we would engage with the company and say, hey, look, can you contact this hotel and find out what the heck is going on? How come there's no hot water? We've had several crews there that haven't had hot water. Or in the case that maybe that might be, we had a hotel recently, I forget which one it was, but they had an issue with the water system. So they weren't able to provide hot water. It was like for a week they were waiting on a part or something like that. So in that case, we had several reports. We were able to work with the company and relocate those pilots to a different hotel until that hotel was able to resolve that problem.
Yeah, it's sounds a little complex. I'm sure it's convoluted at times, but it's important work, you know. It's we've dealt with, obviously, the company deals with fatigue and rest and stuff, and this is all foundational for some of these problems. So I'm sure the company
Oh,
appreciates the
100,
work you guys do. I know
100%.
the pilots do, and yeah, I think this is a great conversation to have and kind of just give some insight to what goes on behind the scenes with the hotel committee. So
Well, the other thing too is I know from being a pilot myself, and I've most of us fly a full schedule, and the last thing you want to do is wait in a hotel lobby. The last thing you want to do is wait for transportation. Um, we want to have as seamless of a process as we can, and for the most part, it's relatively good, at least in my experience. But I totally understand when you get there and there's no sign-in sheet, or they're asking for a credit card, or the transportation's late. Like, it's really irritating. And I know that there's nothing in the moment that we as the hotel committee can do. And that's why I touched on earlier, having the pilots, a little bit of the responsibility is going to be on the pilot to manage and problem solve and work with the company. And then some of that stuff we fight on the back end for and advocate for the pilot group.
yeah, yeah, it's important to kind of put your foot down. I'm a reserve captain, so I deal with this stuff pretty consistently. And I've learned to just, try to work with, like you said, work with the front desk. If that doesn't get you anywhere, call travel. I do think we have a great travel department here. I've worked with lots of them, especially on reserve, and they're they're just a phone call away. They're here to help, and I genuinely believe that. So I think overall, you guys are doing good work, and appreciate the work you guys are doing for us. So parting words here. If you kind of had one piece of advice or one little bit of information for the pilot group, what would you tell them?
Yeah, I think we do sometimes darts and you read them, and not to speak poorly about anybody, but when you read those darts and you're like, okay, I'm not sure if this person is venting or if they just don't know the contract, or what the deal is. And we've had some darts, I'll just use the refrigerator as an example. Some darts on pilots not knowing that a refrigerator isn't a contractual requirement. And I'm just using that as an example. They submit a dart because there's no refrigerators in the room. And I think it's really important. I know the MEC preaches this, the previous MEC preached it, but know the contract, right? And I'm not saying we're not willing to help. I'm absolutely here. All of us are here willing to help the pilots. But sometimes just a quick dig into there might answer your question. And we're happy to answer the questions, but I think that's really important is know the contract, not only for standpoints like that, but know what the company can and cannot do. We had just use another really good example. We had a pilot that was denied a hotel on a over a 5 hour and 15-minute sit. And the reason was because the company told them that, well, the departure time could change. That doesn't
Yep.
matter, right? If you have a sit for 5 hours and 15 minutes, you're entitled to a hotel room. So it's really important to know the contract to make sure that the company isn't taking advantage of you, but also make sure that you're fulfilling your end of the contract as well. It's a two-way street. So that and just say no, know the contract to make sure that you're protected. The contract's there to protect the pilots. And also make sure to file the darts and to bring the issues to our attention. Photos, super important. Those are super helpful when we sit down and have these meetings. I've pulled up photos in the past and shown them in meetings and asked them, would you let your family stay here? And the look on these faces, they're like, absolutely not on some of the more egregious
Yep.
ones. But really what we want is we want to be reasonable, want to have these pilots, like I said, they're sacrificing time away from their families for this career and they're missing out on things at home with kids and with their wives and girlfriends, whatnot. And it's important that you have somewhere where you can get well rested. You have, if you're on a longer overnight, you've got entertainment facilities, something to do around there, and then meal options, right? Those are very basic human needs. And they're important. If there's a hotel or there's a property that's not fitting those basic human needs, that's not reasonable, right? So please file the darts and please let us know about it so that we can address it. We're here to advocate for the pilot group, and obviously part of that is making sure we keep the operation moving as well. But we just need to have that data, so it's really important that people report that so that we can action it. Especially now that we're tracking all this stuff and with the spreadsheets and the graphs, we can identify things a little bit more quickly than just looking trying to sift through darts like we were doing in the past.
Very good. Well, lots of really good information. Again, a big thank you to First Officer Terry Pretzloff for taking time out of your day to come talk to us about the hotels, that process, and get to know you and your committee more. Really do appreciate the work you do for our overnights, keeping us safe, keeping us entertained. Yeah, it's really good work, and I appreciate it. Again, for the pilots, if you've got questions or comments, issues with your hotels, please remember to submit a DART to the hotel committee. It's really important information for them to keep us safe and keep us in good hotels. And if you have any other topics that you'd like to hear more of, please submit a DART to the Sun Country Communications Committee. We'd love to hear from you guys. Remember to check out the MEC website for updates. Talk to your peer-to-peer volunteers wearing the red lanyards and tune in to our next podcast. Remember, fly safe, fly the contract.